Here to share more, please help me welcome Ramon Soto, Chief Marketing and Communications Officer at Northwell Health, and Scott Goodson, Chief Executive Officer and founder of StrawberryFrog.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, everybody. So special thanks to the ANA for allowing us to come up and share a story with you guys. It's nice to see so many friends in the audience as well. We're going to share a little bit with you a very heady story and a bit of a heavy story. And the core of it's around gun violence in the United States. The subtext underneath that is a bit more about how to use purpose to tackle a social health issue, a national health issue, and then also how do you create some brand love while you're doing that. And I run marketing for Northwell Health. I'm joined here with Scott Goodson, the CEO for StrawberryFrog, a good friend, could not have taken this journey without him. So who is Northwell Health? Who is this organization? We are the largest healthcare provider in the New York market, the New York metro market. We're about a $16 billion organization. We have 85,000 employees. We treat 6 million New Yorkers. And we are a purpose-driven brand in a highly hyper-competitive market. That purpose is expressed through our value proposition. We believe in democratizing access to great care. And we express that through these words: better health for all. We believe it's a travesty that where you live can dictate how long you live, and that we have an obligation to tackle hidden injustices in society that really help individuals present themselves to our institutions. And Scott, tell us a little bit about StrawberryFrog.
So StrawberryFrog is a movement company. We design movements for companies and brands. And purpose, well, I say toothless purpose, is kind of giving it all a bad name. You know, companies that have a purpose and don't do anything with it other than have it enshrined in a poster behind the CEO's desk. So we focus on activating purpose with this idea of movements, which we'll talk about in this presentation.
Great, thanks, Scott. So I think we all remember this picture. A bad place to be, and COVID, yes, it did happen. That was not a dream. Nobody wants to talk about it, but it was really this cultural moment. And if you think about it, you lived through history in the making. And arguably, COVID was this shock to the economic environment, to the political environment, to consumers. The world was upside down. Everything was out of equilibrium, and arguably it still is. But within that, we saw some interesting green shoots happening in healthcare and consumers' attitudes to healthcare. So historically, consumers view healthcare as a low-interest category until you need it, and then it rockets up to a high-interest category. But if you reflect, you saw in COVID how fragile health is. And you saw what health enabled: your life, your love, your passion. So how do we take this opportunity and drive purpose through it and engage with consumers really differently? And that's where Northwell really took a step back and tried to understand, how do we redefine our relationship with consumers? How can we have a social conversation with them as well as a physical health conversation with them? How can we empower them to take a different journey, and how do we take the journey with them very, very differently? That led to some work that Scott and I did around our own value proposition, transitioning into our own movement, our own purpose-driven brand in the marketplace. And it led to the work that you see here. It's Raise Health. It's a promise to the market that we are going to help raise their standard of care, raise their health. It's also a challenge to consumers to think about their healthcare differently. So what is purpose? What is purpose? Purpose, from my standpoint, is power. If you take a step back from a purpose standpoint, it's liberating. There's energy. There's an opportunity to reset and rethink how you communicate, how you take the journey with consumers, how you empower individuals. It really is this blue sky of potential. And the question for our business is, how do you activate that purpose? So we're going to take you through a little bit of a case study, and it starts with this slide. So in 2019, this terrible thing happened in the United States. Most consumers don't know about this, but in 2019, the CDC published a study about the causes of death in the United States for children, and guns became the leading cause of death in the US. If you pause and you think about this for a second, it is this absurd place to be. We are better than this as a nation, as a society. And there's tragedy in this. There's tragedy in this slide. Like, how did we get here? I will also tell you I'm optimistic in this slide. If you look at the second cause of death for kids, it is automobile accidents. If we had this conversation in any other Western industrialized nation, that would be the leading cause of death. But look how we were able to bend that curve. And think of the historic work that went into the marketplace to also bend that curve. So there's opportunity here to activate a cause of movement, to make society aware, and to have them partake in driving us to a different place. So the question for us is, how do we create opportunity in crisis? How do you use this event as motivation to your consumers? And how do you foster a different conversation? And healthcare doesn't do this well. Healthcare has been ignoring this conversation because it's incredibly complicated. The puzzle pieces are absolutely insane. Think about it for a second. This is a First Amendment issue. This is an issue that's codified in the Constitution. There are 400 million guns in the United States. There are 320 million people. They're not going anywhere. You layer on top of that a polarized society, companies not wanting to talk about this, healthcare not wanting to talk about this, the slippery slope, the slippery nature of this topic. At the same time, that event in 2019 gives us energy to tap into. Scott, go ahead.
No,
please.
I was going to add one point,
Please do.
which is I think some of the pieces that are really interesting to think about are purpose, and if you activate that purpose, can you drive positive impact in society, but can you also drive positive business outcomes? So one of the hypotheses when we started this program is we can actually do something that drives positive change in society, tries to resolve this horrible statistic you saw a moment ago, but in doing so can be at the benefit of society, but also of Northwell. So that's a couple of pieces that we talked about.
It absolutely is, and a matter of fact, it's realigning those pieces, the complexity of this, to provide a roadmap for Northwell to navigate this, to talk about this, to help bend the curve, and to invite consumers in to be part of the movement. So Scott, talk to us a little bit about what is a cultural movement.
So when you have a purpose and you want to activate it, it's difficult. It's really hard. But purpose is really important because it's the most emotive and most meaningful, easiest idea to remember of a company. So if you look at a societal movement and you use the principles of a societal movement in order to activate a purpose, you can start to see how it immobilizes your employees, how it mobilizes your consumers. And by doing so, you create agency, joy, purpose, belonging. I mean, imagine that. Imagine your workforce having those values, that motivation to participate in something. And you see a lot of brands that try to engage with the culture using their purpose. There was a famous nut snack a couple of years ago that came out and said that women should be paid the same as men. Well, okay, but that's a nice comment, but what are you doing to actually drive positive change? So you need a holistic approach, and what a movement can do is allow you to do that and take into account all the possible ways that that can evolve. So basically, a brand can identify, crystallize, and create a movement in society. And when you do that, you pull people in and they help build it with you. It starts by identifying an idea on the rise in culture that you can use to motivate people to be part of it. And that idea isn't, if you think about a traditional brand idea, it's a brand idea that you're going to use creativity to push out with media into the world. What a movement does is identify an idea that's already relevant to a wide group of people, and then be the brand by be able to crystallize that thought so people want to be part of it. So a good example of that is Raise Health, the movement for Northwell, which is all, has the attitude of raising hell, being bold, challenging the conventions, focusing on clinical examples, but also leaning into social issues like women's health, which was a program that we did last year, or a number of initiatives that Ramon's done, like if you've seen, how many people have Netflix here? Probably everyone. Anyone seen the new show on Netflix called Emergency NYC? That was done by Ramon. Amazing show. You get to do all this cool cultural content that has a direct bearing on the Raise Health movement. But the one we're going to talk about today is this issue in society, which is gun violence. And sorry, just go back one sec.
I can't.
We can't?
But keep going.
Well, I'll just say, so the difference between advertising and a movement is basically advertising, when you spend dollars against an ad, you get awareness. When you stop, it falls short. In a movement, it's almost like a tornado that's constantly going. You invest in that, and it constantly has momentum built into it. Whether the CEO has a LinkedIn post, or someone's making a speech or an action, everything ties together. The CSR program connects with business strategy and internal motivation for employees. It becomes this golden thread that pulls it all together and motivates people.
Great, thank you, Scott. So take the power of movement and tie it to the business challenge. And these were the objectives of the campaign that we put in market. How do you differentiate your brand in a hyper-competitive marketplace? So we practice healthcare in New York. There are large, storied health systems who are incredibly strong. One of our key competitors received its hospital charter by King George in 1751. You have Ivy and academic schools. How do you differentiate yourselves? How do you stand out? How do you build a moat around your competitive advantage? And for us, it was expanding our perspective, occupying the lane of purpose, moving slightly away from the transaction that everybody else is focused on, and having a broader conversation with consumers. How do we establish purpose-driven leadership in dangerous times? So this specific issue, how do we take leadership? That is our moat. And then, importantly, how do we drive social change? How do we get New Yorkers to take a different perspective, a different view, a different attitude, and engage with the work and behave differently in the marketplace? We did a tremendous amount of research. So super important to this process was building the right fact base. It is, given the nature of this slippery slope, incredibly important to know where the market is, where the attitudes are, where the landmines are. And through that extensive research, that extensive fact base, we came up with a couple of observations, two super important numbers here, 87 and 97. And these were the insights that drove the campaign. 87% of parents believed that they would have a conversation with consumers if they dropped off Johnny and Susie. They would want to know, is there an unlocked gun in the house? So think about that for a second. We're in this moment of culture where we have no issue talking about Johnny's peanut allergies or Susie can't swim. Parents just don't know to have this conversation. So this was a hidden truth we teased out. It's very powerful. And then 97% of parents don't mind having the conversation themselves. If they're asked, they would engage in this conversation. So clearly a lane, a thread to exploit and bring to market. The other thing that was really important is to stay away from the Second Amendment. You can intuit that, but how do you reframe this as a public health care epidemic? And that was incredibly important for the success of the campaign. You enter into debates you don't want to have. We didn't want to have our Budweiser moment. We wanted to clearly occupy the lane that we have brand permission to talk in and engage with consumers in a super powerful way. So Scott, talk to us a little bit about the ingredients for the movement.
Yeah, so a movement needs to have an enemy. If you think about what a movement is, you need to stand against something, and then you obviously need to stand for something. So the three ingredients we had for this movement was, what is the enemy? It's the taboo that parents feel when they drop their child off at their play date about asking, right? And then what are we for? We're for people actually asking the question, do you have an unlocked gun in the house? And then coming up with a motto that can be the mantra that motivates this whole program. And that is, doesn't kill to ask.
So let's share with you a little bit of a sizzle reel. You can get a sense of what was the campaign, what was the elements, how did this look in marketplace?
We just wanted to ask, and it's totally cool. There's no issue. The tiger.
And we were just wondering if he'll be locked up.
Yeah, will the tiger be locked up for the whole time?
Absolutely. We never let him out with kids around, not even our own.
It doesn't kill to ask about unlocked guns in the house.
Northwell Health, New York State's largest health system, is encouraging parents to ask others about the status of guns in their homes.
A provocative PSA puts parents on the spot and urges conversations about unsecured guns in the home.
The issue of guns is controversial, but the damage to families and doing something to prevent it should never be controversial.
You know, one question you, thank you. One question you might have is, why did we use levity as the emotional lever in the work? And Scott, maybe we can talk about that a little bit.
Well, when we started, Ramon and I and the teams, there's some of them here today, we looked at all the gun violence work that had been done in the past, and there's a lot of really good work. It tends to be, as you can imagine, a lot of visibility of guns and results of what happens in those situations. And we also had another issue we had to resolve, which is when you talk to people about gun violence, they think it's about a school shooting. When the issue isn't about school shootings, it's about an unlocked gun in the home, which is the majority of this tragedy occurs with young kids and teens in the home. So we had a bit of a challenge, like how do you tell that story and be true to the request of being, impartial, not taking political sides or advocating for something other than asking for an unlocked gun. So we also wanted to be highly accessible. So the use of humor was to solve all those three things. And levity, I shouldn't say humor as much as levity. And it really touched a nerve. And we'll show you in a moment the results of the work. But when Ramon and I came in yesterday, we met a woman at the front desk who said, you guys did that gun violence work? And we were like, yeah. Ramon said, yeah. My mother, she loves that work. And my whole family loved that work. And that's the type of anecdotes that we are hearing over and over again about this work. People, both Republicans and Democrats and independents, everyone realizes this is important, and they just love this message from Northwell.
Yeah, I would add Scott's team came up with 6 concepts. We tested them all, and we tested them with various audiences, Democrats, Republicans, independents, gun violence survivors, police, gun owners, and it became universally accessible work. So it was very important to us. It wasn't just an opinion in terms of was this the route to go in. There was a lot of science and math that went into the decision. So at a separate conference similar to this one, I made a presentation on the campaign and what our strategic intent was. At that conference, it was focused on chief marketing officers from health systems across the country. It was about 60 of them in the room, and they all became super interested in the work, particularly the thinking behind the work, the approach in, the accessibility of the work. And a conversation started about them participating in the work. So Northwell worked with them to do versions of the creative and make it available gratis to them, for them to add their brand and run in their markets. We had 157 health systems participate. This campaign's been in market in every state except 2, Maine and Arizona. I'm not sure why Maine, but I can understand Arizona. And what did it do? What value did it create? How did it move the needle? So first of all, did it create brand differentiation? Did it drive brand love? And we did have really important norms that were broken in terms of all of our brand attributes. I'm going to get to a slide on that in a second. I think really importantly, this drove consideration of Northwell where that was not the objective. We had a 25% increase in consideration, a 26% increase in likelihood to recommend as a direct result of this campaign. Wonderful byproduct of the work, there was no product to sell. I was just trying to get consumers to raise their hand and participate in this journey. Objective 2, our moat. Can we occupy this lane of a purpose-driven brand, convince New Yorkers and others, and across the board, really strong representation of who we are and the value we create and our brand identity associated with this and other topics. Really pleased with the results. These are the more powerful pieces. This is the social results of the campaign. And did this campaign persuade New Yorkers to join us in reducing gun violence, and specifically asking the question? So we held out a control group, did not see the advertising, was not exposed to it. A minority of them would ask the question, is there an unlocked gun in a house? 14%. The vast majority of the marketplace that was exposed to the work, you see here 35%. 35% of that audience would ask the question if there's an unlocked gun in a house, a 250% increase. But this is really the money slide. This is back to those audiences that we researched. And we saw demonstrable movement with, as you would expect, Democrats, but even independents, Republicans. We looked at ad recall, likability, but most importantly, likelihood to ask. And that's the really important metric. Take a look at parents. Remember, the baseline for not exposed is 14%. 7% of parents. Finally, there's a question that they know they need to ask. They now have the willingness to ask the question in a very, very strong place. And then this is that brand love slide that I mentioned. So we, like probably most of you, do brand tracking. This is a monthly tracking study that we do. We try to understand brand attributes, key brand attributes that are important to us. Q3 2022, before the campaign, Q4 2022, after the campaign launched, you see a demonstrable increase. So absolutely, this is creating brand love, and we believe brand differentiation for our organization. But it doesn't stop there. So we're committed to bending the curve, not just engaging with consumers socially. How do we mobilize healthcare? And we saw the interest in those health systems that were adopting our work. We've created this forum to convene like-minded individuals and institutions to help bend this curve. We run it each year. It's the Gun Violence Prevention Forum. If any organization in this room wants to raise their hand and participate, you're more than welcome. It is a who's who of healthcare. It's a who's who of government. It's a who's who of industry, who are all convening to move this forward. In addition, we've commissioned what we call the CEO Council. So we've partnered with 58 CEOs from the largest health systems across the country to not just deal with the communications aspect of this, but deal specifically with the healthcare aspects of it. Screening for gun violence risk in our institutions. How do we keep our workers safe? How do we keep our patients safe? So that group is brand new, but doing some really important work. So with that, we have 6 seconds left. That was pretty good.
That was pretty good. Yeah, amazing.
We want to thank you guys for your attention, and thank you for sharing this with the team. Thank you.
It was great. We do want to do the stick shift.
Thank you, and thank you, first of all, for that incredibly important work that you're doing. This is
Pleasure.
It's hugely important and impactful, and thanks for sharing it. When you kind of think about the scalability of this, because I love that story, right? Kind of
Yes.
grew within your health system, but the real power here is how do you scale that? What are some lessons you've learned on kind of scaling movements, this one, and then Scott, in your experience with other movements you've been part of?
I will tell you that there are a couple of challenges that we still have to deal with. This messaging plays differently by geography and obviously by political environment. I don't think we've completely cracked the code there in terms of how we want to flex this work. We are working on a phase 2, and we will partner with the Health System Coalition that we've originally convened. But I do think more direct research and relevance to geography and the specific tonality of the work so that we can truly engage individuals and overcome some of these barriers of intolerance are the right next steps for us.
Anything else to add there?
I think when you start the program, you need to start with the objective of creating something that others will want to use. So you create a toolbox that has a step-by-step guide so that when you hand it to each of the states, they can take it and run with it.
Awesome, thank you. Okay, question online here. What do you say to marketers who are retreating from purpose marketing, either to focus on short-term results or to avoid Disney-like clash?
Yeah, I'll start there. I do think as marketers, what makes this effort different than some of those things that you've seen, whether it's Disney or Bud, was this was no accident in terms of us entering this lane. And we built a knowledge base that helped us defend the brand while we were pushing the envelope on this social issue. We always knew we would have a bit of a political conversation as a result of this. And it's interesting, I'm a gun owner. I have 4 of them. I have 2 children. I'm an extremist when it comes to protecting my kids. So I probably am the other side of the spectrum on making sure that they're safe and stored safely. I received some email from some people who believed that this campaign was about ultimately taking away their rights. And I chose to engage with a few of them because I thought I had kind of the mindset, the perspective to have the conversation, and I couldn't. Now, the good thing was it was a minority, an extreme minority, just a handful, and we were prepared to debate more if we needed to. But walking into any of these topics, you have to really understand the upside, the downside, and be prepared for the conversation. You don't want to have that conversation by accident. You don't want to be overwhelmed by that conversation. So if it's Disney as a brand talking about a diverse population and how they align with it, are they prepared for the debate that's going to happen? I probably wouldn't have launched this in Florida, to tell you the truth, if I was a health system. I would have chose different geography. We're kind of safe in the New York market. But it is interesting, the bravery of the other health systems that stood forward and actually launched it in their marketplaces.
Yeah, that's pretty compelling if you have 48 states. Excellent work.
I would just add that to this is, you know, what we're talking about, forget the word purpose, right? It's how do you add meaning to what you're doing? So there's a lot of creativity in the world, but that exists on Instagram and TikTok, both entertainment and paid marketing. How do you make the messages you're delivering have an added layer of relevance and meaning to people's lives? That's what we're talking about. And how do you do it in a way that drives business outcomes? You can do both.
Right, absolutely. That's what we call like shared value, right? This is a perfect example of shared value really coming to life. Okay, another audience question. Thank you.
Thank you for that. It's a really powerful message. I live in Brooklyn, so I saw
Great.
a lot of the ads in real time. But as it relates to regionally and then also the creative messaging, how do you determine or do you match the channels in which you're looking to engage or distribute this messaging with the actual geographic location where you're looking to distribute it to?
Yes, so for us, everything was target market driven. And we over-indexed on parents, we over-indexed on grandparents. We all know from life they're a force of nature, and we could pull them into our movement to help drive change. But we wanted to make sure that the message got out fairly broadly. So it was omni-channel, it was very heavy TV, very heavy digital, and very heavily targeted. So the answer is absolutely. I think that formula is going to be a little bit differently as we do it on a national basis. And how do you really get the message to the right communities, particularly communities where it's harder to get the message to. So we explored and we continue to explore partnerships. We have a relationship with 100 churches in the New York market. How do you make this a grassroots campaign as well as one that's a paid media campaign? It's a great question. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you.
All right, we probably have time for one more. Some consumers just want brands to be brands and to not preach to them. How can brands thread this and satisfy all?
So again, it's about creating meaning and relevance. So the program we did last year, an example of Raise Health, was we went out in New York State and we took one of the institutes that Northwell has dedicated to women's health. Now, you can argue that going out and saying that, did you know that all the medical systems and machines that have been invented over the last 50 years have been designed around men's bodies? And there's actually a new medical facility in in New York that is women's certified so that when women go, they can actually see a certified doctor who knows how to treat a woman's body. Now, is that preaching or is that meaningful?
So to add on that, if you click back and you look at healthcare, it's kind of amazing when you think about healthcare and that more brands are not purpose driven. I think it's really a rich opportunity. Consumers, most providers, they fight for the transaction. They fight for that, what we even call an episode of care. It's an event, it's a moment in time. But how do you redefine it to take a journey? I think that formula plays out in different industries, obviously. So do you lead with purpose? Is purpose a part of your value proposition? I think that's where you have to do the hard work of saying where does it fit and where does it drive value and intentionally go after it, not accidentally.
Yeah, absolutely. It's such a great example of the power of brands, but also the responsibility of brands in the world. So thank you for sharing again.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Thank you guys.
Pleasure.